We just wrapped up a video that I called the RPK We Have at Home over at the TA Targets channel. And I thought that this topic deserved a little bit of a follow-up video on my channel, diving into the specifics of my 20-inch RPK build. So kicking it right off the top, obviously I know this is not an RPK, an actual RPK. What I'm trying to do here with this video is sort of paint a picture for you guys to understand what I believe a stateside RPK style build would look like. And I feel like I've achieved that with this particular rifle. So before I even get into the specs of this build, which I will dive into in depth, I want to just ask for your support. So I'm rocking the 7F's hoodie over here. You might not be able to see it over the gun, but I've got a cool hoodie on. We've got a lot of apparel over at the Exodus companies. And I want you guys, after this video, to check the links down in the description. Consider purchasing some of that merchandise over there. It's inexpensive, speaks a message to culture. It's gonna help us change our culture around us, just like these videos are. And that support is what allows me to continue making these videos. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. Let's dive into some of the specifications of this particular build. So starting out, this is an IWI Zion 15 rifle, and it is the same rifle you would have seen in a lot of my content on my Instagram page, but it's been changed with one major modification. I guess we will start at the front. So the biggest change that we have here with this IWI Zion 15 is the Faxon 20-inch barrel. So this 20-inch barrel is going to do a couple things for me. When we're thinking about an RPK build, I think that having a 20-inch barrel is pretty critical. I don't think it's really an option. I mean, I guess you could probably get away with 16-inch barrel and 18-inch barrel, something like that. But when I was looking at building a stateside RPK, the first thing that I wanted to achieve was higher accuracy and higher velocity. So I went with this Faxon fluted 20-inch match barrel. It's threaded with the 1/2x28 thread pitch. So I put my Silencer Co. ASR flash hider on the end of it. And it is technically a 223 wild chambering and a 1-in-8 twist barrel. The 1-in-8 twist is my favorite twist rate for any of my barrels, but especially as I'm launching rounds at distance with a longer barrel like this, I wanted that 1-in-8 twist. I feel like that's a happy medium for all of these different builds that I'm operating with. So after that, the upper receiver, the rail, the lower receiver, the buffer tube, the stock, the grip, and all that's exactly the same as my Zion 15 of the past. We do have a super select fire trigger in this, which I'll talk about in a second. But having the 20-inch barrel is what is going to give me the ability to sustain the high rates of fire while still holding the accuracy that I want to see out of a rifle like this. And the fluted nature of that barrel is going to help dissipate heat and shed a lot of weight. And I can tell you that shooting this thing from the shoulder standing feels very much like a 16-inch rifle, even though it is substantially longer. And we're going to gain a lot of velocity out of those rounds, and the impacts that I hear on our steel targets are substantially harder from this 20-inch versus my other Zion 15s that are 16-inch rifles. So pretty much that's the gist of the barrel. The chambering again is 223 wild, but the rest of the components are very much set up like many of my other Zion 15s or 16-inch AR15s. So let's kind of go through those parts, then I'll explain a little bit why I'm talking about this. So on the front, we've got a mag pull bipod. This is not really necessarily a precision-oriented bipod, but I feel like something like an RPK should have a way to be able to stabilize the gun when you're laying prone or shooting off of a structure. On the bottom of every single one of my rifles, I also have a Picatinny rail section, and that Picatinny rail section is critical because that's how I will attach this into a tripod. We do have other tripods that will actually clamp around the outside of the rail, so that's another option, but being able to shoot prone from cover or on structures or barricades while also being able to clip into a tripod for longer shots and more stabilized standing up shots is critical when we're looking at the task of an RPK style build. Moving back along here, we have a couple different illumination options. So I train with night vision a lot. I own night vision and thermal, so I think having some sort of infrared spectrum lighting source is important as well. I would say if you don't have night vision right now, it's probably not the most important thing for you to purchase, but if you do have some sort of night vision and you're looking at building a build like this 20-inch AR15, something like a D-Ball D2 or another infrared illuminator laser combination would be a solid option for you. But before we even think about that, I think a white light of some sort is more critical. The white light that I chose for this particular build is a Cloud Defensive Rain 2.0. This is a solid weapon light. It puts out a ton of lumens. This thing is no joke when we're looking at the world of white lights. It comes with their own pressure pad, which is nice. It doesn't necessarily do everything that I'd want when we're looking at some of the Surefire pressure pads, but I believe Cloud is adding adapters and things like that to their lineup to accept a lot of those more standardized switches. Don't quote me on that. I'm not super up to snuff with their lights and all the accessories. In front of that, we've got a D-Ball D2. This is a chunky laser, but it's my favorite laser out of all of them that I've run because it has such a potent illuminator. And that illuminator is critical when I'm looking at illuminating something out at distance with my night vision. As we move back the gun, because I want this gun to be capable enough to engage at distance and close range, I have an offset Defender CCW red dot on the side here on a Vortex 45-degree cantilever mount. I put it in front of my ejection port. And the reason I did that is because of the gas that's gonna come back on this system. And we'll talk about that a little bit as I talk about the internals of the gun. But when I've had red dots in the past behind the ejection port, they get a lot of gas and carbon on the front of the lens. It causes a lot of issues over time for you to be able to see through that glass. So I kept this up front. It's a little more awkward to get on the dot, but it keeps it cleaner when I am looking at shooting at closer distances from an offset angle. And then behind that, we've got a spray painted Vortex Razor 1-10. And this scope, I loved it when it came out. It's not my favorite scope anymore because I've seen a lot of progress in Vortex lineup. I tend to like their 3-18 scopes more than the 1-10 anymore. I don't really run LPVOs as much as I used to. I do prefer that 3x or 2x base magnification anymore. I feel like you just get a better eye relief, you get a better image. But the 1-10 was already on this upper receiver before I rebarreled it, so it works out really well for me. It just has one of Vortex 34mm cantilever mounts on it as well. Moving back down through the receiver, standard charging handle, standard buffer weight, standard stock, grip, all of the functions, everything else. They're spray painted, but they are the stock items that would come with the IWI Zion 15. The trigger and fire control group, it is a select fire build. I did drill a 1/8 inch hole in this thing. It is a machine gun by all meanings of that definition. When you flip that switch around to the extra position, it is automatic. So to do that, I had drilled a 1/8 inch hole in the correct location. The Zion 15 receiver is already decked and machined out. You just have to add the hole, add an M16 second sear, and then I added a Geissele Super Select Fire trigger to this package, and that allowed me to have a nice trigger. It's not the best trigger in the world, but it gives me the select fire capabilities on this particular rifle, which is another aspect that I wanted. And I know a lot of you are gonna roll your eyes and say, oh, Jared, well, I can't go do that. I'll get arrested, whatever you wanna say. I'm trying to hone in on a concept here, and we'll talk about the why at the end. Maybe you'll build a build like this without select fire. I don't know, maybe you'll still add a giggle switch. That's up to you. You're an American, you can make choices for yourself and you can weigh pros and cons of those choices. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. But I wanted to have that select fire capability, and ultimately I knew that adding the longer barrel would give me more controllability as well with this rifle. And so that's a good time to talk about the gas system on this. We're running a rifle length gas system. So that's a much longer gas system than the mid-length that would have been inside of the Zion 15 from day one. The Zion 15 with a 16-inch barrel and a mid-length gas system runs like freaking crazy in auto. The rifle length gas system with this 20-inch barrel and the superlative bleed off gas block that I have, it runs smooth. It's very controllable bursts of automatic fire, but because of how I have it dialed in, the cyclic rate is actually lower than when I had the 16-inch with the mid-length gas system. but all around it's much less violent to shoot and it's much easier to land rounds on target. The last aspect I want to talk about with this particular build is going to be the sling. I know you might be saying, well, it's got a bipod and it's got a mount for a tripod. Why would you need a sling? Well, the reality is I'm walking around with this rifle. Like, you're not always strapped into a bipod or a tripod. I would argue that every rifle should have a sling on it so that you can stow it on your body, either on the front or on your back, when not in use. So the last aspect about this build from a spec standpoint would be the fact that that ASR flash hider in the end does allow me to run my Silencer Co. Omega suppressor, and this thing does run suppressed extremely well because of that superlative bleed off gas block. So let's talk about that gas block real quick before I go into the why of this build. The bleed off gas block allows me to dial in the gas and essentially bleed the excess gas forward. So what I was able to do is dial this action into a point where it lightly ejects the brass without the suppressor with light ammo. So oftentimes if it looks like it's undergassed when you're seeing some of the footage, it's because I'm running really light shooting ammunition in this particular video, but I wanted to be able to throw the can on and still have it set enough to vent enough gas forward that I'm not super overgassed to the point where I'm having malfunctions in auto. So this gun is at a happy medium, and I can't stress that enough with this superlative gas block, to where it'll run both suppressed and unsuppressed. And it will run both perfectly fine with any ammunition that I throw at it. So let's talk about the why of this build, because I know some of you might think that we're crazy. Well, the biggest reason why I wanted to do this is because I see the state of our culture. I see the state of our world around us. And the more and more that you think about the founding of this nation, how our founders fought for this country, what they did and who they were, you will find that very rarely did they engage in what I would say are close quarter combat moves. I mean, we crossed the Delaware and we slit throats on Christmas Eve, but that's just one of the examples of, I would say, less of close quarter stuff, whereas there was a whole lot of distance and guerrilla engagements with what I would call mid-range rifles. So a good little bit of homework for you to do after this video is I'm gonna put a card over my head right here, and we'll put at the end an end card and a link in the description to the original video for this particular build that we did over at TA Targets. I got into a lot of the why over in that video, but because I see degradation of culture and I see this political class of elite people, which just essentially means high school dropouts that have no real skills in the real world, they are trying to suppress us and put us into boxes so that we're compliant, so that we're just tax cattle, so that we're just a means to their end. We make them wealthy, we give them power, we allow them to print money, we allow them to tax us without our consent. They engage in foreign conflicts that none of us want to be involved in. And because of this, I see that in the future there could be a major collapse in our country. And frankly, if it gets to that, I want to have tools on hand to be able to defend myself at distance. I still have short rifles. I still love short rifles. I think they're applicable in certain roles. But I do think that citizens should be paying more and more attention to a build like this because it has the better accuracy, because it can have sustained high rates of fire, because it has higher velocity, which frankly means being able to punch through armor better. This will defeat armor better than a 16-inch AR15. My hand loads out of this rifle are coming out at like 3,400 feet per second. That's blazing. That's really, really fast when we're talking about a 5.56. So being able to gain a couple hundred feet per second over a 16-inch while not sacrificing reliability and gas pressures is what I'm after with this build. I want to be able to take game. I want to be able to hike with it. I want it to be mobile enough that I can shoot close, but I want to be able to hit something at 500 yards if I have to. So looking at this build, I feel like I sort of created that perfect combination. If I'm talking about pros and cons of this build, I think the pros are the capabilities, the sustained rate of fire, the full auto nature of this gun, the ability that if we're talking enfilade or defilade firing patterns, this gun can do it. With D60s inside of it, this thing just eats. You can have a whole backpack full of D60s and go to town. And this gun will just take one after another, after another, after another, after another, and it'll put those rounds accurately where they need to be. As far as the cons of this build, it's longer, heavier, it's less easy to maneuver, especially when we've got a suppressor on the end of it. But for me, for the role that I built this thing into, and the fact that it does have some characteristics like the offset red dot, the white light, the fluted barrel that makes it lighter, I am able to still maneuver with this rifle really well. The only thing that I plan on changing on this gun would be the scope. I do plan on taking this scope off, and I'll put a 3-18 on this. And after I do that, I think I've created the perfect RPK of the homeland kind of build. So I'm curious what you guys think. Is this a build that you see as practical in today's culture, in today's day and age? If you think it is, let me know in the comments. And if you want to fight about it with somebody, some random stranger on the internet who you don't even know if their account's real, they might be a bot, they might be paid for by Hillary Clinton or the Bidens, you can get in the comment section and swing left and swing right, go at it. But ultimately, this is what I think. This is just my mindset. I'm just trying to share that with you guys. And I hope that it was helpful for you. So get down in the comments, like, share the video, remember to subscribe, and also, as always, show us some support over at the Exodus companies by buying some of that apparel. We need you guys out in the culture representing the brand and the gear so that we can spread a message of freedom and a peaceful cultural revival in our nation, which is what we desperately need, but it requires you and I to be doing the work. Stay well, stay safe. I'll see you guys in the next one.